10 Golden Age stars whose wives always cheated on them. Hollywood's golden age wasn't only golden when cameras were rolling. Behind those flawless publicity photos and fancy movie premieres, there was a world full of betrayal that studio helpers worked extra hard to keep away from the public eye. Today, we're revealing Hollywood's biggest secret. We're talking about the top male actors who won at the box office but lost in their own homes. The stars you looked up to, the men that millions of women dreamed about, were often returning home to wives who were secretly having affairs with other men. These weren't just random affairs. These were planned betrayals that left Hollywood's biggest stars emotionally broken while they continued smiling in front of cameras. What you're about to learn isn't written in the official life stories. This is the honest, unedited truth about 10 Golden Age legends whose personal lives were completely different from the romantic stories they showed on screen. And the most shocking part? Some of these famous men never even discovered the full truth about how they were humiliated until many years later. I suppose you didn't hear her say anything either. Well, you see, I was kind of tired, and I wasn't paying much attention to, why don't you all... 1. George Sanders, the cynical star, cuckolded by Gabor. George Sanders built his career playing sophisticated, cynical characters who viewed the world with sardonic detachment. With his cultured British accent and air of world-weary experience, Sanders specialized in portraying men who were too intelligent to be fooled by anyone. The tragic irony is that in his personal life, Sanders found himself married to one of Hollywood's most notoriously unfaithful women, the glamorous Hungarian actress Gabor. George gave her diamonds. She gave her attention to literally everyone else. Sanders and Gabor married in 1949, bringing together two of Hollywood's most distinctive personalities. Sanders, known for his biting wit and intellectual manner, seemed an unlikely match for the flamboyant, attention-seeking Gabor. Friends questioned the pairing from the start, wondering what the cerebral Sanders saw in the publicity-hungry actress beyond her obvious physical charms. One friend recalled that George was absolutely obsessed with her initially. She represented everything he wasn't: spontaneous, emotionally expressive, uninhibited. He found her endlessly fascinating, like some exotic creature he'd discovered and couldn't quite categorize. That fascination soon turned to disappointment as Gabor's taste for male attention became increasingly obvious. Unlike most Hollywood wives who kept at least a pretense of faithfulness, Gabor made little effort to hide her wandering eye and hands. One frequent dinner guest revealed that Zaza would flirt with other men right in front of George. Not just casual flirtation, but overtly suggestive behavior, touching, whispering, making plans within earshot of her husband. She seemed to enjoy his discomfort, almost as if she were testing how much he would tolerate. According to multiple sources, Gabor's behavior went well beyond flirtation. She allegedly had numerous affairs during their marriage, including a widely rumored liaison with Dominican playboy and diplomat Porfirio Rubirosa, and even a brief fling with Frank Sinatra. One Hollywood socialite noted she had a particular fondness for powerful, virile men who represented a stark contrast to the cerebral Sanders. She pursued them openly, as if daring George to object. When he eventually did, she would dismiss his concerns with a laugh and a wave of her hand, as if his jealousy was an amusing quirk rather than a legitimate complaint. What made the situation particularly humiliating for Sanders was how public Gabor's affairs became. Her liaisons were reported in gossip columns and discussed openly at industry gatherings. Sanders, a man who valued his dignity and public image, found himself increasingly portrayed as the cuckolded husband, a role completely at odds with the commanding, unflappable characters he played on screen. One colleague observed that for a man like George, the public humiliation was far worse than the actual cheating.
He could perhaps have tolerated Zaza's affairs had she been private, but she seemed to enjoy the attention her behavior generated without any concern for how it affected him. Sanders' response to this situation revealed the complex psychology of a man torn between his pride and his persistent fascination with his wayward wife. Rather than immediately ending the marriage, he alternated between cold withdrawal and desperate attempts to win back Gabor's exclusive attention. One friend of the couple said he would shower her with expensive gifts, jewelry, furs, even a Mercedes convertible, in what seemed like attempts to compete with her other admirers. Then, when these gestures failed to change her behavior, he would retreat into icy sarcasm and pointed public remarks about fidelity and dignity. This painful dynamic continued for approximately 5 years before Sanders finally filed for divorce in 1954. In his divorce filing, he cited extreme cruelty, a legal term that barely hinted at the public humiliation he had endured throughout their marriage. After their divorce, Gabor went on to marry 5 more times, while Sanders married 3 more times, including a brief, ill-fated union with Zaza's sister, Magda. This strange choice led many to wonder if Sanders had ever fully freed himself from the emotional web of their relationship with Zaza. Sanders' experience with Gabor seemed to deepen the cynicism that had always been part of his persona. In his later years, he became increasingly bitter about relationships and marriage, often making caustic public statements that echoed the disillusioned characters he portrayed on screen. Tragically, this cynicism may have contributed to his eventual death in 1972. His infamous death note, "Dear world, I am leaving because I am bored," reflected the profound disillusionment of a man who had seen through the pretensions of Hollywood, romance, both on and off screen.
2. Robert Walker, the devastated star left behind. Robert Walker achieved fame playing sensitive, vulnerable young men before delivering his masterful performance as the psychopathic Bruno Anthony in Hitchcock's Strangers on a Train. But Walker's most painful role was one he never chose, the devastated husband left behind when his wife Jennifer Jones began a very public affair with powerful producer David O. Selznick. She didn't cheat in secret. She left him for the most powerful man in Hollywood. Walker and Jones, then known as Phyllis Isley, met as young acting students, married in 1939, and headed to Hollywood together. Initially, Walker found more success, getting a contract with MGM, while Jones struggled to find meaningful roles. Everything changed in 1941 when Jones auditioned for producer David O. Selznick, one of the most powerful figures in Hollywood. Selznick was immediately captivated, not just by Jones's acting potential, but by the young actress herself. He signed her to a personal contract, changed her name to Jennifer Jones, and began carefully crafting both her career and public image. One former employee revealed that Selznick's interest wasn't just professional from the very beginning. Everyone in his organization could see that he was infatuated with her. As Selznick's professional attention helped Jones's career grow, culminating in her Academy Award-winning performance in The Song of Bernadette in 1943, his personal attention increased as well. Their professional relationship evolved into a romantic one by 1942, while Jones was still married to Walker. One MGM staff member recalled there was no attempt to hide what was happening. Selznick would send his car for her daily, have flowers delivered to her constantly, and they would be seen together at restaurants and functions. It was the most public secret affair in Hollywood. What made this situation particularly painful for Walker was his complete powerlessness. As an actor under contract to MGM, he couldn't directly challenge Selznick, who had enormous influence throughout the industry. Moreover, Selznick was actively advancing Jones's career, while Walker's professional future could be destroyed with a single phone call. A friend explained that Robert was in an impossible position. The man who was taking his wife was the same man who could end his career with a word. He had to watch this affair unfold in front of the entire industry while maintaining enough professional composure to continue working. Walker's response to this humiliation revealed both his vulnerability and self-destructive tendencies. Never emotionally strong, he began drinking heavily, a habit that would eventually contribute to his early death. His behavior became increasingly unstable, leading to embarrassing public incidents and professional difficulties. Jones filed for divorce in 1945, officially ending a marriage that had effectively been over since Selznick entered the picture. She married Selznick in 1949, after his own divorce was finalized. For Walker, the aftermath was devastating. Beyond the personal humiliation, he lost regular access to his two sons with Jones, as they began living primarily with their mother and Selznick. Despite these personal struggles, Walker experienced a professional comeback in the early 1950s with his brilliant performance in Strangers on a Train, 1951. Tragically, he died shortly after completing the film, suffering a fatal reaction to prescription sedatives combined with alcohol. He was just 32 years old.
3. Tony Curtis, the Hollywood heartbreaker who got a taste of his own medicine. Tony Curtis and Janet Leigh were Hollywood's dream couple. Young, gorgeous, and photogenic, they represented the glamorous ideal of showbiz marriage in the 1950s. But behind this carefully built appearance lay a more complicated reality, where Curtis's notorious womanizing eventually triggered responses from Leigh that few outside their inner circle ever suspected. He was busy chasing bonds, she was busy making sure she wasn't one of them. Curtis's reputation as a Hollywood ladies' man was well known even before his marriage to Leigh in 1951. His marriage to Leigh, while based on genuine attraction, did little to stop these desires. One fellow actor recalled that Tony never stopped being a kid in a candy store. Marriage was just a piece of paper to him. It didn't change his behavior at all. If anything, becoming half of Hollywood's golden couple just made him more attractive to women. Curtis's affairs weren't occasional mistakes, but a consistent pattern. From co-stars to extras, from Hollywood parties to filming locations, Curtis pursued women with an enthusiasm that became legendary in industry circles. One studio insider noted, "He wasn't even particularly private. Everyone knew what was happening except the general public, who continued to believe in the perfect marriage being sold to them in fan magazines." What's less known is how Janet Leigh responded to her husband's constant betrayals. The public story has typically shown her as the loyal, suffering wife. But according to those close to the couple, Leigh's response was more complex and active. One friend insisted that Janet was nobody's victim. When it became clear that Tony's behavior wasn't going to change, she began establishing her own connections outside the marriage. These connections, according to multiple sources, included emotional attachments to several of her co-stars and at least one director. Unlike Curtis's often physical and brief encounters, Leigh's relationships tended to be more substantial, built around intellectual and emotional compatibility. Someone who worked with her on multiple films explained that Janet was selective and private. She formed bonds with men who offered the emotional support and respect that Tony's immaturity couldn't provide. This created an unusual dynamic within their marriage. Curtis pursued his conquests openly and impulsively, while Leigh developed deeper but more carefully guarded connections. Those in their social circle noted the irony. Curtis's behavior was more obvious, but ultimately less threatening to the marriage than Leigh's more meaningful attachments. The marriage finally ended in 1962, after 11 years. While Curtis's affairs were the official cause, those close to them suggested that the real breaking point came when Leigh formed an emotional attachment that made the emptiness of her marriage impossible to ignore any longer.
4. William Holden, the golden boy who met his match. William Holden represented Hollywood's ideal of the all-American leading man, handsome, charming, and radiating masculine appeal. His performances in classics like Sunset Boulevard and The Bridge on the River Kwai established him as one of the industry's most respected actors. But behind his golden boy image lay a complicated marriage to actress Brenda Marshall that went against the simple stories Hollywood preferred. Hollywood's golden boy met his match behind closed doors. Holden's marriage to Marshall lasted from 1941 to 1971, an incredibly long time by Hollywood standards. The length of their union led many to assume they had achieved that rarest of Hollywood accomplishments, a stable, traditional marriage. The reality was far more complex. One colleague revealed that Bill's affairs were legendary around town. His affairs with co-stars like Grace Kelly and Audrey Hepburn weren't even particularly hidden. He had this incredible charm that women couldn't resist. What's less known is how Brenda Marshall responded to her husband's continuous affairs. Rather than playing the role of the long-suffering wife, Marshall eventually developed her own independent emotional life. One family friend explained that Brenda was nobody's fool. After the first few years and countless affairs, she made a calculated decision. She would keep the marriage and family life they had built together, but she would also quietly seek emotional fulfillment elsewhere. According to sources from their social circle, Marshall developed several close relationships with men who provided the emotional attention that Holden's constant absences and affairs left missing. These relationships were handled with extreme privacy, far more carefully managed than Holden's often public romances. One neighbor noted she entertained certain gentleman friends when Bill was away filming. These weren't flashy affairs. They were quiet, dignified relationships with intelligent, cultured men who treated her with the respect she deserved. This arrangement created an unusual household dynamic. Holden would return home from his various location shoots and affairs, and the couple would smoothly resume their public role as a devoted Hollywood couple. They raised their children together, kept an active social life, and showed every appearance of a successful marriage. One close family friend said they had an unspoken agreement. When Bill was home, he was fully present as a husband and father. Brenda never confronted him about his affairs, and he pretended not to notice her special friendships. Despite the unconventional nature of their marriage, those close to them insisted that Holden and Marshall kept genuine affection and respect for each other throughout most of their 30-year union. Their arrangement seemed less about passion and more about practicality, two intelligent adults who had found a way to accommodate each other's needs while preserving the family structure.
5. Errol Flynn. When two cheaters share a mansion. Errol Flynn swashbuckled his way into Hollywood history with his handsome looks and irresistible charisma. His adventures on screen made him the definitive action star of his time. But off-screen, Flynn's first marriage to French actress Lily Demita created a volatile household where marital faithfulness was perhaps the only adventure neither person was interested in pursuing. Two cheaters, one mansion, and a sword collection in between. Flynn's reputation as a womanizer is well documented. His famous statement, "I like my whiskey old and my women young," reflected an approach to life built around seeking pleasure. What's less commonly discussed is that in Lily Demita, he met a woman whose approach to faithfulness was just as casual as his own. One Hollywood veteran explained that Lily was already a sophisticated European star when she met Errol. When she married Flynn, nobody who knew her expected faithfulness to be part of the deal, including Flynn himself. According to accounts from their social circle, the Flynn-Demita marriage worked on an unspoken understanding. Both were free to pursue other interests as long as a certain level of privacy was maintained. What made their situation unusual was the openness with which they sometimes acknowledged each other's affairs. One frequent guest recalled they would occasionally throw fancy parties at their Mulholland Drive estate. Errol would be openly flirting with young actresses in one room while Lily entertained her own admirers in another. There was this surreal quality to these events, like everyone was participating in an elaborate pretend game. This unusual dynamic created a household atmosphere that visitors found both fascinating and disturbing. The Flynns kept separate bedrooms connected by a sitting room. According to household staff, these rooms would sometimes be occupied by visitors who were clearly more than casual guests. One employee observed, "It was like they were running parallel lives under the same roof.
They shared the public parts of the house, but kept entirely separate private spaces and schedules. What complicated this arrangement was that despite their mutual affairs, Flynn and Demita appeared to maintain a passionate, if turbulent, connection to each other. Their arguments were legendary in Hollywood, with both people displaying volcanic tempers. One neighbor said they didn't just argue, they performed their arguments, shouting in multiple languages, throwing valuable objects, threatening grand gestures like murder. Then, just as suddenly, they would make up with equal drama and intensity. Their marriage finally ended in 1942 after 6 turbulent years. While Flynn's affairs were certainly factors in the breakup, friends suggested that the relationship had simply exhausted both people. The constant drama and jealousies had created a situation that even these two exceptionally energetic personalities could no longer sustain.
6. Mickey Rooney, the star who couldn't keep a wife loyal. Mickey Rooney ruled the box office in the late 1930s and early 1940s. His boyish charm made him America's most loved young star. But off-screen, Rooney's romantic life was a spectacular disaster, a series of 8 marriages marked by betrayal and heartbreak that contrasted sharply with the wholesome Andy Hardy character that made him famous. He could charm America, but couldn't keep a wife loyal for more than a year. Rooney's first marriage to Hollywood bombshell Ava Gardner in 1942 set the pattern that would repeat throughout his life. Despite his stardom, Rooney, standing just 5'2", often seemed to chase women who were taller than him, both physically and in terms of beauty. One MGM co-worker recalled that Mickey pursued Ava with the same energy he brought to his performances. Gifts, attention, grand gestures, he overwhelmed her. But once they were married, that energy went elsewhere, back to the studio, to other women, to gambling and nightlife. According to accounts, Gardner quickly became disappointed with Rooney's absences and rumored affairs. What's less known is that she allegedly began her own affair with billionaire Howard Hughes during the latter part of their marriage. One Hollywood hostess said that when she realized Mickey was seeing other women, she accepted Hughes's persistent attention. Mickey was so busy with his own adventures that he didn't notice until someone from the studio told him. This pattern, Rooney's wandering eye followed by his wife's revenge affairs, would repeat throughout his romantic history. His second wife, Betty Jane Phillips, reportedly began a relationship with a musician after discovering Rooney's multiple affairs. His third wife, Martha Vickers, allegedly became involved with a director while married to Rooney. What makes Rooney's situation particularly ironic is that while he started the pattern of cheating in most of his marriages, he reacted with self-righteous anger when his wives eventually did the same. Despite his own constant cheating, Rooney expected complete loyalty from his wives. One MGM insider recalled he would explode with jealousy at the slightest hint his wives were straying. This from a man who couldn't go a week without chasing a new showgirl. The double standard was breathtaking. By his 5th marriage, his reputation was so well known that the pattern sped up. Wives began looking elsewhere sooner, sometimes after just months of marriage. One industry veteran said people would literally make bets on how long it would be before reports came out of either Mickey or his new wife being seen around town with someone else.
7. Gary Cooper, The Gentleman's Agreement. Gary Cooper represented American values on screen. Honesty, straightforwardness, and moral clarity defined his most famous roles. But off-screen, Cooper's 28-year marriage to socialite Veronica Balfe, known as Rocky, worked under rules that would have shocked his fans. A sophisticated arrangement that both people understood but never publicly talked about. They had a silent agreement. Don't embarrass each other. Just don't get caught. Cooper's affairs were well known in Hollywood circles. His romances with co-stars, including Grace Kelly, Patricia Neal, and Ingrid Bergman, were poorly kept secrets. But what stayed hidden from public knowledge was Rocky's response to her husband's wandering eye. She eventually established her own private relationships. One longtime family friend explained that Rocky wasn't naive. She came from high society, where marriages like theirs were common. The only rule was complete privacy and keeping up the public appearance of the perfect marriage. According to sources from their social group, Rocky began having her own well-managed affairs after about 10 years of marriage, once she realized that Cooper's cheating was a permanent part of their relationship. One society hostess noted that she was much too sophisticated to create scenes or give ultimatums. Instead, she simply began developing relationships with intelligent, private men, usually from her East Coast social circle rather than Hollywood people. What makes this arrangement particularly interesting is that it wasn't born from not caring. By all accounts, Cooper and Rocky kept genuine affection for each other throughout their marriage. They raised their daughter Maria together, maintained a united public appearance, and even seemed to enjoy each other's company. One frequent guest at their home observed they had an unusual bond. They could be in a room full of people, and you'd still feel this connection between them, a private understanding that no one else knew about. This unspoken arrangement became difficult only once, when Cooper's 3-year affair with Patricia Neal became so intense that it threatened to destroy both the public appearance and their private understanding. During this time, Cooper actually moved out of the family home and divorce seemed certain. One friend said that was the one time Rocky drew a line. Affairs were acceptable within their arrangement, but falling in love was not. In the end, Cooper ended the relationship with Neal and returned to his marriage. Whether this was because of his lasting feelings for Rocky, worry about scandal hurting his career, or simply recognizing that their arrangement offered the stability he needed, remains unclear.
8. Clark Gable, the king of Hollywood, dethroned at home. Clark Gable, the handsome star who made women faint as Rhett Buckler in Gone with the Wind, was Hollywood royalty in every way. Called the King of Hollywood, Gable's masculine charm made him the industry's most profitable leading man for many years. But before finding happiness with comedy star Carole Lombard, Gable's earlier marriages showed a man who wasn't always king of his own home. Hollywood's king wasn't always in charge at home. Gable's first 2 marriages, to Josephine Dillon and Rhea Langham, have long made people curious. Both women were much older than Gable, Dillon by 17 years and Langham by 11. And both were rich, cultured women who helped change the rough young actor into the sophisticated star he would become. One MGM co-worker revealed that Josephine treated him more like a project than a husband. She improved his speech, paid for his dental work, guided his career, but she also kept him on a very tight leash financially and socially. This control reportedly included Josephine maintaining her own independent social life, which several sources suggest included relationships with other men. Given the big age difference, some historians believe their marriage may have been more of a business deal than a romantic partnership. One neighbor claimed there were definitely men who visited Josephine when Clark was away filming or at studio events. Whether these were romantic relationships or just social visits was never clear, but how often they happened and when raised people's suspicions. Gable's second marriage to Rhea Langham followed a similar pattern. Another older, wealthy woman, Langham gave Gable stability and social connections. But again, sources suggest that Rhea kept relationships with other men, especially when Gable's growing fame began keeping him away from home. One Hollywood hostess noted that Rhea had a particular friend, a European gentleman who seemed to show up whenever Clark was away filming or at studio events. They were very comfortable together in a way that suggested a long-standing closeness. This changed dramatically when Gable met and fell in love with actress Carole Lombard. With Lombard, a successful actress who was closer to his own age, Gable finally experienced a partnership of equals built on real passion rather than convenience or career help. One studio insider observed that with Carole, he was a different man.
For the first time, he seemed truly in love rather than just playing a role in someone else's plan.
9. Desi Arnaz, when Lucy decided two could play that game. America's favorite redhead and her Cuban band leader husband looked like the perfect married couple on I Love Lucy. Their chemistry on screen captured audiences, making them television's first superstar couple. But behind the scenes was a marriage filled with cheating. And not just from the well-known womanizer Desi. They both had affairs, but Lucy knew how to do it without being caught. Desi Arnaz's cheating was Hollywood's worst-kept secret. His affairs were so many and so obvious that even studio publicity people had trouble hiding the stories. From dancers to prostitutes, Arnaz seemed unable to stay faithful, often not even trying to hide his betrayals. One CBS executive revealed that Desi wouldn't just cheat, he'd do it in public places where he knew he'd be recognized. It was like he wanted Lucy to find out. For years, the story focused only on Desi's betrayals and Lucy's patience, but recently discovered information suggests a more complicated truth. Lucille Ball eventually started having her own affairs, not because she wanted to find new love, but as a planned response to Desi's constant embarrassment of her. One longtime friend explained it was a form of emotional survival for her. After years of public shame, she decided that what was acceptable for him was acceptable for her too. But unlike Desi, she was smart about keeping it quiet. While Desi had his affairs carelessly, Lucy was careful and private. She reportedly developed close relationships with at least two of her co-stars, always being careful to maintain believable denial. A former studio publicity worker said Lucy was brilliant at protecting her public image. She understood that while audiences might forgive Desi for his affairs, they would never forgive her if she was caught doing the same thing. What made this situation especially sad was that despite their mutual cheating, Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz truly loved each other. Their passionate connection never completely disappeared. One longtime family friend observed that even after their divorce in 1960, they couldn't live together, but they never really emotionally moved on from each other. Even after both remarried, there was always this connection between them.
10. Humphrey Bogart, the tough guy who couldn't control his aggressive wife. Before Humphrey Bogart found real love with Lauren Bacall, America's favorite tough guy was stuck in a marriage that seemed like it came from the darkest crime movies he acted in. His third wife, Mayo Methot, wasn't just difficult, she was famous for her angry outbursts, earning the nickname Sluggy because she would get physically violent during their huge fights fueled by alcohol. While Bogart shined on movie screens, his wife caused problems at home, and rumors say she wasn't causing them by herself. Their Hollywood Hills home became known around town as Sluggy Hollow, a twist on the peaceful-sounding Sleepy Hollow. People who saw them reported broken dishes, smashed glass, and even furniture being thrown out of windows during their famous fights. What most people didn't know was that Methot's extreme jealousy wasn't just in her head. It was her projecting her own actions onto him. According to several people close to the couple, including houseworkers and neighbors, Mayo had many visitors when Bogart was away filming or promoting his films. One neighbor said there was a specific delivery man who seemed to need a very long time to drop off packages. Sometimes he would show up just minutes after Bogart left and wouldn't leave until right before he was expected back home. Bogart suspected these affairs, but he was trapped in a difficult situation. Male stars back then were supposed to control their households, and admitting his wife was cheating would have been seen as a shameful failure of his manhood, which could have hurt his tough guy reputation. Perhaps most ironic was that Methot's jealous anger about Bogart possibly having affairs got worse at the exact same rate as her own cheating increased. During the making of Casablanca, when Bogart was working long hours, Mayo's visitors reportedly became even more common. Their marriage finally ended in 1945, when Bogart fell in love with his young co-star, Lauren Bacall, from To Have and Have Not. While this relationship is usually shown as Bogart leaving his troubled wife for a younger woman, people on the inside suggest a different story.
Bogart finally found the strength to leave a harmful marriage after years of quiet embarrassment.
Hollywood's golden age created magnificent illusions on screen. Romance, devotion, and faithfulness were portrayed as the norm. But behind the cameras, many of cinema's most iconic leading men were experiencing a very different reality. While their fans imagined them as the ultimate romantic prizes, these stars often returned home to wives who sought fulfillment elsewhere. What makes these stories particularly sad is the gap between public perception and private reality. The very men whose careers depended on projecting images of masculine appeal and romantic dominance were in their private lives experiencing betrayal and humiliation they could never publicly acknowledge. For some, like Bogart and Gable, these early experiences of marital cheating eventually gave way to genuine, lasting love in later marriages. For others, like Walker and Sanders, the psychological damage never fully healed, contributing to tragic endings. And for stars like Cooper and Holden, complex marital arrangements developed that accommodated both partners' needs while maintaining the all-important public appearance. These stories remind us that behind Hollywood's perfectly crafted images lay genuine human experiences, complicated, messy, and often heartbreaking. The leading men who made millions of viewers swoon were in their private moments just as vulnerable to betrayal and heartbreak as anyone else. Perhaps that's the most lasting lesson from Hollywood's golden era. Even at the height of the studio system's power to create and control public stories, the messy realities of human relationships remained beyond anyone's ability to script or direct. If you've enjoyed this look into Hollywood's hidden history, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more untold stories from cinema's golden age. Leave a comment below with your thoughts on these revelations and which Hollywood legends you'd like to learn more about. Until next time, thanks for watching.